This is episode 3 of For the Love of the Game interview series. This is an interview series that interviews athletes, coaches, and professionals in the sports industry. I have a very special guest here. This is Josh Pittman, coming off a season as the assistant coach for the Manhattan College Jaspers. How you doing, Josh?
Good, Pete. How you doing?
Doing well. How would you assess your first season on the staff at a Division I school?
Yeah, it was really good. Under unique circumstances, obviously that's out of our control, but it was a lot of fun. The kids are great. I get the question asked, would you do it all over again with what you had to endure? And I would. I mean, it was fun. It was probably the most fun I've ever had on being around a team, being around a coaching staff. It was just one of those things that you just couldn't wait to get to work every day. And so, man, I loved it. I loved every single minute of it.
Josh, you come in as the Dobo, and then you get elevated to be basically be on the staff, and you're involved in the day-to-day operations in almost every facet. Scouting, it was your first rodeo of the MAC conference as well. What could you say about really getting that opportunity and that exposure, and how tough was it, not only because of just everything that happened, but also learning a new program, and then also a new league by extension?
Yeah, I think when you come in as a Dobo, you got to learn a lot of different stuff with travel and things like that. I'm not from New York, so I didn't know the area. I didn't know how they normally did things here. So it took a few weeks to figure things out. Obviously, driving places here is different. It's something I just wasn't used to at all. So it was a few weeks before I kind of got the hang of it. But then, once I did, it wasn't that bad. The other assistants were there to help me out too as well. So that was great. I was familiar with the league just from watching it in the years past. But kind of being involved, it was different. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the league. I enjoyed the travel. I enjoyed the coaches. Everybody was great. And so for me, it was a lot of fun this year.
Yep. And the Jaspers coming off a 12-18 season, as well as a 10-10 showing in conference play. That was their most wins in conference play since, I believe, the 17-18 season. Off the bat, really, I mean, you guys got started down in Virginia. Kind of definitely everybody had that game, I think, on their radar going into the season, just because Manhattan was picked number 2. But suddenly here you guys are down at an Atlantic 10 school, not only an Atlantic 10 school, but a very competitive Atlantic 10 school under Mike Rhodes. What was it like in that moment, considering, if I remember correctly, you guys were already down Logan Paget, maybe even a couple other guys didn't suit up as well.
So we're down a point guard, and Ant Nelson had only been practicing for, a week. And so we knew he wasn't in shape. And so we knew going into it with them pressing 40 minutes, which they're known for, we didn't really know what to expect, to be honest with you. But I think after the game, we all kind of sat around, and I think it was Nick Brennan and coach, and we were just kind of looking around like, man, we're going to be all right. It may take us some time, but I think we're going to surprise some people. We've got some nice pieces if we can just get everybody healthy, which, we never really did get healthy. But I think as far as that game, it was kind of a wake-up call because there were some bright spots. We did some good things there. It was early. And like I said, it's tough playing in that system and that environment when you don't have a point guard.
Yep. And then going on from there, you guys show up in Teaneck, New Jersey for your second game after the game against Central gets canceled. You show up in Teaneck. All of a sudden, you're playing against a team, Fairleigh Dickinson, who nobody knew that – come March would go on and upset the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament in Purdue, putting that program on the map. What do you remember?
I mean, when we played them, I didn't know much about them. I knew Jack Castleberry, who got the job now. And so we kind of had a relationship for a few years. So, but besides that, I didn't know. I mean, I'd heard Tobin did phenomenal at his D2 school. So just following that with small college basketball, I knew who he was. Didn't really know much about their team. I felt like we played well enough to win, just didn't make a few plays at the end. But I knew they had really good guards. And guards obviously win games. Did I think that they would beat Purdue? Absolutely not. And I honestly thought, they have a chance to be pretty good, but I don't think anybody after that game was like, man, that's going to be a team that advances in the NCAA tournament and beats the number 1 seed. So, but hats off to them. Tobin does a really good job, and obviously it was fun to watch them play in the NCAA tournament.
Guys ultimately end up in London. What was the experience like in London? Everybody had that one circled, I'm sure. And can you talk about, whatever happened on the court, right? I mean, you guys went 1-1. It was a solid showing, but really just the experience and how big was that for the team bonding?
Yeah, I think a lot of guys, I don't think any of us had ever been to London, so we didn't really know what to expect. People were like, this is what you got to do for the time zone and change and all that. And we did everything, and we were still jet lagged pretty bad. Like the first day, I think I was wide awake at 3 a.m. And I asked all the other guys, I'm like, man, I followed exactly what they said to do, and I was wide awake at 3, and they were the same way. But it was cool to see the city. It was cool, cool experience. Basketball can take people places that normally they never get to go.
Yep.
And, a lot of those guys will never get to go see London. There was just so much to see, so much culture, similar to New York as far as the city and things like that. But it was a great experience for them just to see something different, to hang around each other. Obviously we spent Thanksgiving over there. So they did their best part to give us a Thanksgiving meal, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun to be around the guys to kind of just hang out. Obviously we won 1 game, lost 1 game. And so we played well. It was still early. Obviously we lost Elijah for the year that game, and we were getting Samir back the second game, I think. And so it was a tough 2-game stretch, but we came out with a split, and that's kind of what we were hoping for. But as far as an experience, it was a great experience for the guys just to go see another part of the world that normally they wouldn't get to see without basketball.
How was were you able to get away from scouting and enjoy a couple of beers here or there? And
I did. Me and Anthony Duran actually went to one just to experience it. I was like, man, I gotta experience it. And I actually went to one, and I was like, man, I want a local beer. I was like, I don't care what it is, you guys pick it. I just want a local beer. And he gave me a Coors Light, and I was like, what in the world? So that was my first experience ever in a British pub, was getting a Coors Light. So that was unique. But it was a unique situation, just being in the pubs. It's a different lifestyle. So it was fun. We just wanted to experience it. And so AD and I went down there and just experienced it and saw what it was about.
As a whole, really, non-conference schedule this year was pretty fun. I remember I was at the game against Bryant, was one of maybe 5 or 6 games I was able to make it to this year. A couple at Draddy. So the one against Bryant was one of them that I was able to go to. A game that was originally scheduled to be at Gaucho's gym. They ended up scheduling it back at Draddy for a home-and-home series with Bryant that will continue into next season. But, that game was a shootout. You have a team like Bryant, coached by Coach Grasso, team that's high-scoring, electric, led by Earl Timberlake. You got Doug Eddard, who's coming off the bench. That one against Bryant, to me, that one was a tough one because you guys played them so hard, and really one play or 2 plays really could have decided that. And I thought it would have been a really good resume win for you guys.
I'm like, we could have won 10 more games, and we probably could have lost 5 or 6 more games too. Yep. That were so close. And so, but they were so talented. They were athletic. They played hard. They were tough. But our guys competed.
You got your first taste too of the Manhattan Iona series. Was that probably the loudest you heard Draddy all season?
It was a unique experience. I actually came up here once, and it was right after Manhattan won their back-to-back titles, and I think it was AJ English, that Iona team.
Yep.
Iona beat them at Draddy, and I was there, and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Pretty cool environment. But as far as that game, it was wild. We got down big like we always do. And then we just kind of gradually just clawed our way back. And, I think we just got tired. We just ran out of gas.
Kind of the second half of the season was unbelievable in terms of these comebacks, right? You saw yourselves get behind early in a lot of games, and then mounted these massive comebacks. Game at Quinnipiac when Ant had the game winner was just unbelievable. Game against Siena, who I think with you guys were down big early, and you were down with 10 or 11 minutes left, went on a run there. What was it with this team in terms of the comebacks and being able to feed off each other?
We just played free. There was no pressure on us. I think I heard before the year we're probably going to win 2 conference games or something like that. And we don't really listen to the outside noise. I mean, we hear it. We just
it never happens in the MAC. Never.
Yeah, never. 4 or 5 guys that could score. I think a lot of times that we'd start off so tight, and I never really figured out why we could do it. I mean, we tried different rotations. We tried everything. We just came out tight a lot of times, and a lot of times it was just calm down. Maybe they were forcing the issue. I think they wanted to win so bad for RaShawn that they would try too hard. And I think once we got them in the locker room, it wasn't a lot of X's and O's. It's like, all right, guys, we've been here before. We were probably here last week because we do this every week, and so we relaxed. And I remember telling guys I don't know what game it was. We were down 8 with 4 to go. And I was like, all right, we got them right where we want them. I'd rather be down 8 than up 8.
Yeah, right.
Because you guys are so tight.
Almost just like the NBA with at times in the second half of the season when it was a 20-point deficit, really almost for this team was maybe an 8 or 10-point deficit, especially when you have a guy like Ant who was a veteran and was able to have more scoring opportunities, I think, this season as opposed than he did last season. And you guys go up to Siena, and I'm literally wherever I am, doing work or wherever, I'm going on social media. And next thing I know, I see a picture with you guys and Antonio Brown. What can you talk about that? And that seemed like that one came out of left field.
We were actually at shoot around, and I guess they had hit him, and his dad had just bought this professional arena league team, I think.
Yep.
And so they were introducing him and doing the press conference. And I remember looking down there, and I'm like, you kind of think you're seeing things, I'll be honest with you, because I'm like, why would Antonio Brown be here in Albany? And sure enough, everybody was like, that's him. And so I think he thought we were Siena. So he came down and started talking to us. But we just got a picture with him. I mean, we loved him. I mean, he spent, 10, 15 minutes talking to us, wishing us good luck. And all that. So it was kind of a cool experience for our guys.
He's like the ultimate showman. He pulls up in his big fur coat. He just signed his contract to take over the rights of the team, the indoor football team. Fortunately, season comes to an end in Atlantic City. As my boss at Daily Dose of Hoops, Jaden Daly, likes to say, MAC after dark. And you guys played the MAC after dark game, first round against Marist. Game didn't tip off until around 10:45. How anxious were you guys to get on the court?
It is what it is. I don't think that's an ideal situation playing at 10:45 conference tournament, but you know what? That's kind of what you have to do when you have it all at one site. So somebody's got to go late, and sure enough, the games are going to go late. I mean, we expected, I don't know what time the game was supposed to start, maybe 9. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, it was at least delayed an hour and a half.
Me going into it, I was like, this game's not starting until 10, just to let our guys know. So we kind of knew going into it, but I think it was 10:42. I look up, and we still have 4 minutes to warm up, and I'm yawning, and I'm like,
oh, man.
I think I look over at Tyler Wilson. I'm like, man, I'm tired. I'm really, really tired. And he's like, yeah, I mean, it's about 11 o'clock at night, but I can never say I've played a game at 10:45. They obviously played better than we did. They deserve to win, but obviously no, I've never played a game at 11 o'clock.
No, Atlantic City is dead, as you got a little bit of a taste of. It's dead that time of year.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I couldn't make it down this year because my car broke down, and I didn't even know I was going to be able to go to the NCAA tournament. So for me, when my car broke down, I was like, damn, I'm not going to be able to go see the teams I've covered all year. I remember speaking to Baker Dunleavy, and it's just how crazy the MAC is. He was telling me, he was like, yeah, I didn't know if we were going to play on either Thursday or Tuesday. and how basically your schedules can change so fast. And they ended up getting the Thursday game, and at that point, Marist had hit the ground running after what they did to you guys. And that brings me to Louisville now. You're a born and bred Louisville guy, in New York now. But talk about growing up in Louisville. What was it like, and getting your degree from University of Louisville? How special was that? I'd imagine that was probably a dream of yours.
Obviously, growing up, you always wanted to play at Louisville. My mother was a gymnast at Louisville, which they don't have a gymnastics program, but she would always tell me stories of they'd be practicing on one side of the practice gym, which is Crawford Gymnasium, which is no longer there. And then on the other side, because they had 2 courts, and on the other side, Denny Crum would be running practices. And so I think about that nowadays, and I'm like, there's no way a college basketball coach would, at Louisville or someplace like that, would allow that. But yeah, my mother, she was a gymnast there. My aunt was a tennis player. My uncle was a tennis player. So, we're Louisville through and through. My brother, he went to the University of Kentucky. Not sure why, but he did that. But yeah, it's a cool place to grow up. Obviously, we have no pro sports teams.
Yep.
And so it's all about Louisville athletics, which is really cool. As far as being a college athlete at the university, I mean, that's it. That's you. You're the New York Knicks, so you're the Yankees of Louisville. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. For our listeners, Josh's brother-in-law, Jacob Lane, has his own podcast out in Louisville, and he covers the Cardinals out there. What could you say about your that podcast and what your brother-in-law Jake does?
It's called The State of Louisville, and so he covers more football, basketball, but he's probably a diehard fan more than anybody. But he does a lot of podcasts for every sport. He has somebody working that does everything, whether it's women's basketball or men's basketball or football or baseball. So he's got it going on. So it seems like anytime I talk to him, he's either doing a podcast with somebody, editing a podcast, just finishing a podcast, writing a story. But he lives and breathes it, man.
Your experience at Louisville, right? You were a student assistant there. Can you talk about your experiences working with 4 Division I coaches there at the time?
I mean, it was a great experience. The staff was really good. Obviously, Coach Pitino's one of the best to ever do it. Kevin Willard was an assistant who's at Maryland. Obviously, Steve. That's where I met Steve Masiello, who's now, he was at Manhattan, and then he's now at St. John's. Marvin Menzies is at UMKC, and then our video coordinator was actually Dan McHale was at Eastern Kentucky. So I had 5 Division I head coaches on that staff, which is kind of unheard of. You don't see that, but each of them was so good at just a certain thing. And you kind of just sat back and watched. My biggest regret is that I didn't take more notes than I did. We get a practice plan every day, and I didn't take as many notes as I should have, just because, when you're in college, you don't really think about that stuff. But those guys were so good. A lot of times I didn't even say anything. I listened, and that's kind of what I did. And I did what they said, and it was a great experience. It was a tough first year there. We were coming off the Final Four.
Yep.
And then we were preseason top 5 in the country, but we were really young. So we had lost like Francisco Garcia. He just left the draft. And we had a New Jersey kid, Taekwon Dean, who was kind of our leader. And so we ended up going to the NIT. So, obviously being preseason top 5 to go into the NIT in Louisville is not really accepted. And so it was a tough year. But it was a lot of fun still learning from those guys. I mean, I can't thank them enough for the opportunities. I wouldn't be where I'm at today without those 5 guys.
How much does Coach Pitino mean to the Cardinal Nation?
I think he's well liked still. I mean, obviously some things happened, and so, but I think a lot of people still respect him. They like him. I'm kind of removed from it. So being up here, I don't know. I think everybody respects him. I think it's a smart fan base that understands basketball. And so I think they understand, hey, this is one of the best to ever do it. And they're grateful for what he did for the program. Obviously coming off, not a lot of programs can go from Denny Crum, who's one of the best, to Rick Pitino, who's one of the best. You got, I think Crum was there 30 years and Pitino was there 17, 18. You've got 50 years almost of great coaches, Hall of Fame basketball. And so I think we kind of got spoiled as Louisville fans, basically, with those two guys.
Right, and I got Rick Pitino on the media side of things, and I can definitely say that Rick Pitino is probably one of the most interesting people ever in basketball media, really. Him coming from Kentucky to Louisville, that one must have felt good, huh?
Yeah, I think, Kentucky fans were upset. And listen, if he stays at Kentucky and he's still there at Kentucky, I think you're talking, you got John Wooden 1, Rick Pitino 2, Mike Krzyzewski's in there as well. But he had that thing going at Kentucky. I mean, they won it in 96. They went to the Final Four in 97, national runner-up, I think, in 97 to Arizona.
Yep.
Then he leaves, goes to Boston. They win it in 98. And I think some Kentucky fans were upset. I think it would have been uglier, which he never would have done this if he would have gone straight from Kentucky to Louisville. I think the fact that he went to Boston kind of mellowed out some Kentucky fans.
You're at Louisville, right? And you probably say to yourself at that point, like, I want to get into coaching. So you go down, you first start off at Center College in Louisville, in the Louisville area, and then ultimately find yourself at different stops, most recently before Manhattan down at Berry College. Could you talk about your experiences coaching on the Division III level, and did that really bolster your love of the game?
I think because at the Division III level, you don't get athletic scholarships, so you're doing it. A lot of these kids are pretty much walk-ons, but they're doing it for the love of the game. That they don't get NIL money. They're paying to go to school there. And so a lot of them do it for the love of the game. And it's a tough, there's some really good coaches, because I think at the Division I level, we had Ant Nelson, where if the play breaks down, you give him the ball and something good's going to happen. Whereas at the Division III level, maybe you don't have an Ant Nelson. And so that makes it tough.
Great job, obviously, during your time at Center College. Had the chance to compete in the Division III NCAA tournament. How was that? What was that experience like?
COVID had just started, and so we were actually playing at Emory, which they're in the league with NYU and everything like that. It's probably the best D3 league in the country. And so we were actually playing down in Atlanta, and President Trump was down there dealing with the CDC stuff. So it was crazy. So the team we were playing against, Pomona Pitzer out of California, we actually stayed at the same hotel. We were like, hey, we're going to leave at the same time, so we know we're getting there at the same time. And so we ended up playing. We lost first round, and then we got upset. But then obviously the NCAA tournament was called at the Sweet 16 at the Division III level. So we actually got a few rounds in. Obviously Division I didn't get anything in. So at least we were fortunate to play in our NCAA tournament.
And, you had the opportunity to go down to Georgia, coach at Berry. What was that experience like, both as a coach and culturally?
Obviously, it's a little warmer down there, but it was Berry was in the same league as Center. And so a friend of mine got the Berry job as an interim, and so I went down there with him. I was familiar with the league, and we ended up winning that league that year. It's a small world, because we were interim last year, and then I'm interim this year. And so I was able to help Ray with dealing with it and kind of what to expect. But you know what? We had a great year. We were 23-3, won the regular season, won the conference title, went to the NCAA tournament. And so it was great. I love Georgia. They're more football down there, but they do love their basketball. I'll give them that.
So, Josh, I mean, from Kentucky, you also were big into horse racing. Obviously, you have Churchill, a stone's throw away. What was that like, being around the horse racing culture, especially because you told me that you have an affinity for it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big horse racing guy. I mean, it's just this time of year and the Derby, you just kind of miss it. And so it's cool just kind of being around it. A lot of the people in Louisville don't go to the Derby. They go to the Oaks, which is the Derby for the fillies, the female horses. And so They do a great job of promoting everything. I always tell people if I wasn't doing basketball, I'd probably want to do something in the horse racing industry. I just think it's a cool industry. I coach a kid named Mac Walton, who's dad at Trevecca down in Nashville, and his dad is Elliot Walton, who's the president of Windstar Farms. And so they had Justified, who won the Triple Crown. So it's kind of cool following that. This year we weren't able to go to the Derby, and so we actually went to the Belmont to watch it, and so it was cool.
And Josh, we're recently coming off obviously a really fun NCAA tournament. I know you were down in Houston.
Yeah.
How much did you enjoy watching the games? I'm sure, obviously as a competitor and coach, you want to be in that, but watching the games, whether it was FAU's run, FDU's upset over Purdue, UConn's phenomenal run, a team like Princeton making it to the Sweet 16 and upsetting Arizona in the first round.
Being down there, just the environment's electric. The fans are great. It's just an unbelievable sporting event. I mean, you just never know what can happen. You just got to be the best team for pretty much 2 hours. As you see, there's so much parity in college basketball now. Anybody can literally beat anybody. So, but as far as the Final Four, just being down there, the environment, the fans, watching the games, it's just a pageantry of basketball, and you're surrounded by basketball fans, basketball coaches. It's a fun venue.
Houston is massive. It's almost like New York City of Texas. Did it feel so big? It almost felt like it was too big for that Final Four.
Yeah, it's kind of spread out. Houston is spread out. I'm a fan. New Orleans was nice just because everything was down there. Yeah. Where you could walk from your hotel to the arena. Indianapolis is great just because it's close. But as far as Houston, I mean, it was spread out. But, there's only so many places that you can have these things at. And I think once the ball's tipped, it's basketball. Once, there's so much leading up to it. A friend of mine, he's on staff at Auburn, and I was like, man, how was it? That was so cool, that you were there. And, man, he was like, it's basketball at the end of the day. You're just playing in a bigger arena. And I've talked to a few guys who played it, and they're like, you don't really realize it once the game starts going. You're so focused on the game that, you don't really look around and see 70,000 fans with you. But
all right, Josh, to end things off here, a little rapid fire. Got a couple of quick questions. Favorite Louisville team ever?
05 team. Being down 21 to West Virginia. Taekwondo Dean, Francisco Garcia. Obviously, that was kind of my team. Obviously, I like the 13 team winning the national title.
Favorite Louisville player ever?
Juwan Wheat.
Best New York slice you've had so far?
Yeah, that's tough because I only eat it around here. I only eat it.
I know you've asked for recommendations, and unfortunately, I'm not good in that area. I'm trying to send you to places in Queens or something.
All I go is to Sal's or Goodfellas because they're local. So yeah, I have to go to Sal's or Goodfellas because we order from them all the time. So I'll go with those two guys. You're
getting the Manhattan College slice. All right. Yeah. Have you been to Yankee Stadium yet?
I have. I saw Garrett Cole pitch. Complete game.
Okay. Well, Josh, really appreciate you coming on. I'm really looking forward to seeing where you go next from here. Obviously, you're a great basketball mind. Appreciate you coming on here and your perspective on all things. We got a little bit of everything in this. That's a wrap for episode 3 of For the Love of the Game interview series. I'm your host, Pete Janney, and this was Josh Pittman. Thanks, Josh.